Our final speaker, though, is Mel. And Mel is going to talk to us about witch hunts, and I'm very excited. Now, she indicated that she said this was not a fashion trend, but I used to clip my terrible hair back with 3 to 5 multicolored barrettes on each side while my bowl cut grew out. I would wear a ponytail, so I'm not really sure how I got the severe fade on the sides. But I think it was my father cutting my hair for most of my life prior to age 12, and he's responsible. She said as her hype song, she would definitely enter to Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill to Make a Deal with God, or Tori Amos's Little Earthquakes, and feels that her indie goddess energy would intimidate others. And she said her only hidden talent is the ability to bring shame on her family name. Please welcome my friend, Mel Evans.
Hello. I don't know how this works. Cat. I figured it out on my own.
You got it? You want to use mine? Okay, you're good?
Nope, I'm a strong, independent woman.
Okay.
So, in the 17th century, Massachusetts was populated almost entirely by Puritans. Puritans are different from Pilgrims in as that Puritans really wanted to come to America to begin their own religious utopia, and they didn't bother to make friends with the Native Americans or indigenous people. They just got right to killing them. The town of Salem was actually 2 settlements that were divided. Salem town was closer to the water and therefore full of fishermen and sea merchants. And Salem village was a little bit further into the wilderness, and that's where the farmers lived. The sea merchants and fishermen were really dependent on the farmers for their livelihood, so the people of Salem village, the farmers, wanted to separate into 2 separate towns so they could kind of get a financial upper hand over the people in the town. Now, Salem Village had recently brought Samuel Parrish in as their own minister, which was a big leadership role in the puritanical community, as you can probably understand. And Samuel Parrish was in the middle of this high tension, fishermen versus the sea merchants versus the farmers kind of thing. But everybody could agree that they just loved his 8-hour sermons on how women were more susceptible to sin and damnation. Yeah, a woman in puritanical America's day was her day was made up of tending to the kids, fixing up around the house, answering to her husband, and avoiding the rampant temptations of the devil. Men didn't have to worry about this. Women's soft flesh and simple minds were just more susceptible to damnation. We don't know why. So one day in 1692, Samuel Parrish's daughter Betty and his niece/housemaid Abigail Williams were messing around trying to predict their future husbands with this pre-mash tool called a Venus glass, which involved cracking an egg. The girls only saw a coffin in the egg yolk, and so they freaked out. And then they remembered that their dad/uncle has been telling them day in and day out that the devil's ready to fuck them and steal their souls, and they super freaked out. So the girls started having fits. Now, these fits were mostly described as complaining of headaches and hiding under furniture, which honestly, I do every day. But to abate it, the Parrish's indentured slave or enslaved servant, Tituba, who the Rev Parrish had brought with him from Barbados. So everybody just called Tituba Indian because why bother to find out her real last name or ethnicity? Another farm wife had enlisted her to make a witch cake, which was a pretty common English practice where the afflicted parties peed on some cornmeal, you bake it, you feed it to a dog. The dog gets all the afflicted symptoms and problem solved, right? Well, the Reverend Paris had found this witch cake before it could be fed to any dog. And of course, he beat a confession of witchcraft out of Tituba. So things did not go that well for her. But why? Of course, it's not his fault that witchcraft came into his home. Why not blame it on the woman whose only fault was raising his children like her own? So who else would want to hex these two tween girls? Well, they started pointing at a woman named Sarah Good, who was seen around the village often begging for food and money for herself and her daughter. She had recently been turned away from the Paris home and was muttering under her breath. Muttering, seriously, I'm not making this up, was a legitimate offense in the Puritan community. So, of course, she is capable of witchcraft. And obviously, women of color and the impoverished make super easy targets. So, let's point at them as witches. As the men in the community encouraged these trials, more and more girls started having fits. Nowadays, there's a theory that the grain could have been infected, so the girls were essentially kind of microdosing like your college roommate does. But everybody in their homes was eating the same bread and nobody was having the same symptoms. It's more likely that they saw how important and how listened to Betty and Abigail had become and how they were laying down and not spending 8 hours of their day husking corn and making candles. And we're like, oh, yeah, me too. I'm hexed. I gotta go lay down. So by the time the trials actually started, there were 5 girls who were complaining of being hexed, the oldest of whom was 12 years old. When the accused were brought out, they started acting like the littlest contestant on America's Got Talent, and they were moaning, screaming, pointing, and falling to the ground. They had a huge, huge show, like they were auditioning for the titular role in Annie. Tituba, at this point, literally beaten into submission, figured maybe things would be a little easier if she just gave them what they want. So she confessed. She said yes, the devil had come to her and bid her to serve him. She said that he appeared as a man in a big black hat, not unlike Reverend Paris. And he had her sign her name in his black book, and there were 9 other names in that book. Well, this is enough for the Puritans who are like, get you to jail. But it wasn't enough for the Sabrina the Teenage Witch Club, who were like, oh no, 9 names, let me keep pointing. And they actually went around from door to door, seeing if anybody had anything to confess. The girls were actually brought in as witch detectors to other cities. And the men in town ate this up because they pointed to all the people that they were trying to usurp in Salem town where the rich fishermen were. So, oh, I'm so sorry. They were even sent over to other towns, but the numbers didn't stop at 9, therefore. Weirdly, so many of the witches came from Salem town. Ultimately, over 200 people were accused of witchcraft, the youngest being Sarah Good's 4-year-old daughter, who was shackled by her 4-year-old wrists and 4-year-old ankles so they could restrain her spirit from torturing people in the night. Since single and young, lower class women didn't have any means of defense in terms of a husband or money, they were more often accused. This hysteria only died down when the governor of Massachusetts' wife was accused. And he was like, okay, y'all better check yourselves lest you wreck themselves. The judges were actually angry that they had come so close to purifying the land and were stopped. Because ultimately, a battle over real estate between the wealthiest in a society masquerading as religious zealotry that ultimately only results in the persecution of women and social outcasts is just history repeating. And it's going to keep repeating until we stop using the bodies of the most vulnerable as ammunition. You did great.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I need to let you know Mel's talk was originally 48 hours long. And she managed to concentrate it down to only 20 minutes. Normally, yes, there's a 5-minute rule. But if you have a speaker that shows up so impassioned and just really wants to throw down, who has been a previous speaker who has crushed it, and you have someone call in sick, you let them keep talking because we may or may not agree with the message that she is communicating to all of you this evening. Little print. Okay, so say what? She has more if anybody wants to talk to Mel after the show.